Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Keys to Real Estate. I'm your host, Mary Schuster. Well, today's guest is someone I think you'll really enjoy getting to know. She's a public speaker, researcher, and author on the subjects of our evolving workplace and the blending of talents across different generations. We're in such a time of change right now. It's really going on everywhere. And one of the places trying hard to balance changing expectations and a new reality is in our workplaces. So we called in an expert today, Lisa Walden, to break it all down for us. Let's get straight to this conversation, which helps us understand what's changing and how to better navigate our evolving work lives. Please enjoy my conversation with the ever curious and always insightful Lisa Walden. The presenting sponsor of the Keys to Real Estate podcast is RamQuest. RamQuest fosters a customer-first culture built around an unwavering commitment to provide solutions that don't just meet, but exceed expectations. RamQuest's newest title and settlement production solution, Horizon, delivers unparalleled efficiency, robust features, and scalability to ensure you have tools to boost productivity and elevate performance like never before. Horizon streamlines your operation with secure 24/7 access, automatic updates, and all the power that only the cloud can offer. Plus, Horizon offers a direct connection to the industry's most extensive network of service providers and partners. Experience Horizon for yourself when you visit ramquest.com. And now, please enjoy the show. Well, author and keynote speaker, Lisa Walden, thanks for joining us today on the Keys to Real Estate podcast.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Well, we want to talk today about the evolving workplace, and you are quite an expert on that topic. I wanted to start by talking about sort of the great chasm is a notion that's going on out there. And for listeners, viewers who are not familiar with what that is, what is the Great Chasm?
Great question. Yeah, it sounds a little foreboding when you first hear it.
It does.
But yeah, so the Great Chasm is this, my business partner and I, Hannah, so if I ever speak in the we, it's not a royal we, I'm referring to my business partner. We work very closely together. And we work with hundreds of companies a year across a variety of different industries. And as a part of our work, we're constantly interviewing people within organizations. So we're interviewing people at all levels, leaders, CEOs, owners, and also individual contributors, direct reports. And in our work, increasingly, I think we've seen this trend kind of rising since the pandemic, actually, since about 2020. But increasingly, we've noticed that there is a growing disconnect between what leaders and owners think, want, and see, and what individual contributors think, want, and see from the workplace. And this rift, this growing rift, is what we're calling the Great Chasm. So it's tied to a lot of different things, but as you can imagine, a main one is this concept of flexible work and the ability to work in a hybrid fashion, working from home versus going into the office. The debate around RTO, which is return to office, is huge. It's raging, but the disconnect between those two fronts only seems to be growing and is definitely causing a lot of mayhem at work.
Well, and you kind of demographically, I think I want to say off the top, are in the perfect place to explain and you sit in the middle of this great chasm because you're a millennial, I think.
I'm a millennial.
And
yes.
so
They're millennial.
Yes. And the sort of that first cohort you were talking about tend to be sort of, generally speaking, Gen X and older. And then some of the key producers on the other side of the chasm tend to be more the Gen Z and that. So you're the translation layer between the two groups. So that's fantastic. I have some more questions then. In our industry, we kind of deal with that on both sides of the equation. We deal with on the commercial real estate side of what's going on with these office vacancies and is the RTO, the return to work, going to prevail, and will occupancy rates come back up, or is it trending more a different way? And the second way our industry deals with it is we're also production centers in offices, businesses in offices. So we kind of deal with both sides of this coin, which is a great reason to talk about this today. What's the research say about whether this is effective, ineffective? And if we could, I'd like to sort of address it first from the kind of the manager, owner, CEO perspective. And then if we could also the earlier career folks and their perspective, what's the research show about how this is working or not?
Yeah, so there is one study I'm thinking of in particular, and of course the actual name of it is escaping me, but it happened fairly recently. It was a global study looking at the effectiveness of flexible and hybrid work and its effectiveness in terms of productivity and retention rates. And this study that, again, maybe we can put it in the show notes or something because it's not popping into my head, but this study found that there was an increase on both of those fronts. So overall workplace happiness rose, productivity rose, and retention rates rose. And this was, again, a multi-country study. It was conducted across multiple different countries across the world. And I mean, I think it's one of many that are pointing to the fact that hybrid work benefits human beings. It's a way to humanize work. And it's something that people are only going to continue to ask for. I know that early on, when the pandemic happened and forced everyone into hybrid, many leaders said to me, this is temporary. We're going to revert back to the way it was in a matter of time. And as I always like to say, you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. People know that it's possible. You can no longer say this style of work doesn't function for us because we're this type of industry. A lot of industries proved that when forced to, a little creativity allowed them to reimagine what work could look like. And the research bears it out that it is absolutely a positive, net positive. Now, to be fair, I understand where leaders are coming from. And I know there's definitely challenges with hybrid flexible work. There's the piece of coming together, of brainstorming, of building community and culture, which is harder when you are in a hybrid setup. It's no question about it. It's absolutely harder, but it's worth it. And the benefits in retention, the reduction in attrition, the just employee satisfaction when you offer some degree of flexibility. It does not have to be, work from home 5 days a week. It can be 3 days in the office, 2 days at home, but some degree of flexibility. The more we study it, the more we look at it, the more valuable it seems as a workplace setup.
Well, and to your point, I think when the pandemic happened and a lot of leaders who hadn't considered it before, and then we just had to do it in emergency mode, I think a lot of leaders were surprised that productivity and efficiency stayed high. And so I think that was sort of the first piece of the puzzle of understanding it can be done. But then to your point, it's a matter of now figuring out how it should go forward. And I think some of that hesitation, you tell me, because you're out there in the field doing the research, is the hesitation around that. Maybe I'm not certain if I have the metrics I need to have. Is it more, I have this brick and mortar space under lease, and so I need to get people back in? What are you hearing are the reasons for some of the drive to the return to office?
It's a good question. I think a lot of what I see is a resistance to change. And there's a lot of reasons for why. But at the end of the day, I do think it's a resistance to change and not feeling like the new way of doing things is going to be as effective as the old way of doing things. I like to call it white knuckling to the way it was. Whether you're the most progressive leader or you're super open to this or not, there's going to be some white knuckling and some grieving of the way it used to be. Pre-pandemic, we created this brand new office space. It was, we made these, spaces that people would love to go to. We invested so much money and effort and time into creating this place that people would want to show up.
And culture.
And now you're telling us, yeah.
And culture. Yeah.
And now you're telling us that, they want to work from home. So what are we supposed to do? It's with this investment. For me, it's a little bit of the fallacy of sunk costs. When we look at the price, the cost of attrition, of losing people, of replacing individual employees who are leaving to find those, hybrid virtual opportunities, you can't think of it that way. You have to rethink the way you're seeing the office space. And certainly we can make good use of those spaces, but we have to stop thinking about it as we created this and now we've lost, so much money and time and effort and energy and investment in this space, but rather, okay, it's going to serve a different function than we thought of at first. This is going to be a place where maybe not everyone comes every day. Maybe we give people options to come in within certain parameters. So the way I like to say it is there's a difference between using carrots and sticks to get people to come into the office, even if it's 3 days a week, 4 days a week. We have to think about how are we using these physical spaces and making them into kind of a carrot. Why am I showing up to the office if I'm going to be on Zoom calls all day? That's not a good enough reason. So we have to think about what is the intent, what is the purpose of coming together in an office in person, and really incentivize people to come in to say, oh, this is why I want to sit through, an hour's worth of traffic today. This is why I'm wearing hard pants instead of my comfy soft, like tie pants, because there's a reason, there's a good reason. And we're having these communal meetings, we're connecting with one another. But yes, certainly the physical, tangible office space and that lost investment or perceived lost investment is a huge piece. Despite what the research says, despite the numbers that almost every organization I spoke to, almost every leader said productivity has increased in our organization since we went, virtual or hybrid in the pandemic. And yet they all wanted their people back in the office. So there's this major disconnect between what's actually happening and this desire to return to what was and what was comfortable. I think this sense of, if I can see my people doing the work, if I can sort of know that they're there, that they're focused, then I have this peace of mind that yes, the work is happening, even though productivity measures by all accounts show that work is happening. So again, we go back to that white knuckling of needing to see things the way it was and perceiving kind of losses that are not really there. And I will say there's so many things about hybrid virtual work that we need to consider. We're in a period of iteration. So we've worked in an office in that capacity for decades at this point. We've got that down pat. We know how to do that decently well. Hybrid work is new. The way that we're doing it right now and the scale at which, we're doing it as a global community, that is absolutely new. We are iterating. We're in the process of, experimenting, of figuring out what works, what doesn't work. So there's a lot of unwillingness to do the hard work. And I understand because we're all busy. We're exhausted. We're like, in the office is easy. I know how to do that. But we have to make the time investment, the experimentation investment right now in order to really build a future that's going to be better for everyone, including the bottom line. But again, there is that this is not the way it was when I was growing up. I'm just not sure if I can trust that the work is happening. And that hesitation causes a lot of leaders to kind of revert to what's easy, which is let's come back to the office.
Support for today's episode is provided by October Research. October Research provides national coverage of case law, news, regulatory updates, and competitive business strategies critical for sustaining an innovative and compliant real estate business operation. Our portfolio publications offer independent and unbiased information that helps you stay educated and informed on what matters most to your business. So visit octoberresearch.com to learn more about our portfolio of real estate publications, sign up for free email news, educational webinars, and premier industry events for thought leaders. Knowledge, the competitive advantage. Well, if I can drill down in a couple of areas and get your opinion on a couple of things. You mentioned about, I'm just not sure if the work is actually being done. And there were some pretty noticeable headlines recently about a small crop of employees getting fired in a sector of our industry, actually, because it was suspected or proved, I didn't get that deep into it, that they had been using Mouse-Jigglers to make themselves look available when they weren't necessarily or able to respond. Or and my thought at the time was, oh, first of all, oh gosh. But then I got to thinking about it and I thought, well, we've had unproductive people in our hallways and our cubicles for decades. It's not that the unproductive problem goes away. It might be harder to spot. I don't know. I'd be interested to see what you're hearing and seeing out in the field about that.
Yeah. The Mouse-Jigglers, to be honest, a big question I have is, if the work is still getting done, does it really matter that there is mouse jiggling happening? So to me, it's not even the question. I've seen those mouse jigglers, on TikTok. There are commercials for those, and it's so funny. The way that people can be very inventive to appear to be working is But here's the thing, you hit the nail on the head. People are doing it no matter what. So you have mouse jigglers at home, but trust me, you have people who are avoiding working in the office. No matter how much oversight exists, people are skirting. They will find a way. People will find a way for malicious compliance. It is just built into human nature for some people, and it's just the way it is. The way humans will be, the way they will always be, whether they're working at home or in an office. And to me, at the end of the day, the question really becomes, are they getting the work done? If they are, does it matter that they're jiggling their mouse? And why do they have to jiggle their mouse in the first place? Do you have some expectation that is maybe outdated and needs to be revisited? Does that green light on Slack need to be on if the work is getting done? Now, if they're not meeting key expectations, if they're not available for questions, if they're not showing up to meetings, if their work is subpar, yes, please address that. And, maybe that's not the right role, or maybe they need some training into how do you work from home and do it effectively. But to me, the question of, and I know this is going to sound like almost workplace sacrilegious to some people, but I don't care if someone's using a mouse jiggler as long as they're doing the work. And I don't think a leader should anyway. I actually think it points to a problem within expectations around what we just talked about. So what needs to change that's causing them to buy a mouse jiggler or get a mouse jiggler
Right.
setup? Maybe
Fair.
it's something internally that needs to change. Again, as long as the work is getting done, and as long as the culture is being, built and thrived and expanded upon, it should not be an issue. It should not be an issue. And the issue is rather the expectations versus the mouse jiggler itself.
Is about the hours put in or the output put out, and that is a management issue. I mean, same thing. You're still measuring key metrics and having conversations around the outliers. Yeah, okay, that's fair. That's a better way of looking at it, I think. And I think everybody'd be less frustrated if more people looked at it that way.
That's right. Well, I mean, it's a difference of feeling as if you are a person on an assembly line, and that you're almost looked at in this robotic way of output of, what is your output, and why are you not constantly available or constantly on the clock? And I, as a leader, as a boss, because that's a very much a boss mindset in my opinion. And it's never as simple as this. Of course, I don't know the context behind all of it, so I'm oversimplifying. I do understand that, but
Sure.
the approach of, I heard that you had a mouse jiggler, I have proof that you had a mouse jiggler, and so you're fired because this is not the kind of people we want working for us. To me, that dynamic between not just the people that were let go, but the people who stay on to the organization, it sets up this relationship of boss and employee in a kind of negative way. I think there's more of I always advocate for a coaching mindset and a leading with curiosity first. So we go back to this example. Why did people buy mouse jigglers? What is the expectation that you have set at the organization that caused them to? Are they doing their work? If the answer is yes, might we revise those expectations? If the answer is no, might we look into discussing, this is why, this is not working, and this is not acceptable, and this is what I need to see from you in order to change that. So I've lost the thread a little bit here, but I do think that the dynamic between a boss mindset and a coaching mindset can make all the difference, and not just with the employee or person in question who might be the challenge in that moment, but in a much broader context. Everyone sees those behaviors and makes conclusions about their position in an organization based on how other people are treated as well.
That's a really good point. That is a very good point. Another thing that came to mind a little bit ago, I wanted to ask you about when you talk about productivity and when you talk about all of that coming into the hybrid place. I think I've experienced, I want to see if it rings true with you or not, is I find that people are able to execute very well. Like when they know what to do, when either they've been in their job a long time or they kind of work alone or something like that. When it's down to execution, I can speak from experience. When it comes to execution, I am able to be more productive and more efficient than I was when I was going into the office for a myriad of reasons. What I wonder about, though, of where we're getting cramps and where we might benefit from some days in the office is sort of the ideation, the visualization, the where are we going to next, that big collaborative, big mindset almost requires some face-to-face and energy and what abouts and hallway conversations. and those sorts of things. I don't know if that's a fair line of demarcation. Again, I'd love to see what you're finding out in the real world.
I agree. The thing is, I agree. It's a both and kind of a question for me, because
Okay.
so when we think about opening up the talent pool to a hybrid or virtual pool of people, there are challenges in terms of bringing people together. So if we have, someone from working in Florida, two people in California, five people in New York, it's going to be tough to bring people into the office. Now, I know not everyone has that global or countrywide hiring pool or capability. Their organizations or industry is not set up for that. Even so, let's say you're all located in the same general area. You can come into the office and gather as a company, as an organization, 2 to 3 days a week. I have to say, I'm a pretty big proponent of hybrid over virtual when possible. I do think that coming into the office, seeing the whites of one another's eyes, getting to know each other in person does add a layer of complexity and depth to relationships that's really important. There was one person I worked with who she actually did. So her organization, they were spread across the world actually. And she worked in London, and one of her colleagues worked in New York. They just had this extremely fraught relationship and dynamic. And it was, classically professional drama where nobody said anything particularly. If you captured it on paper and read it, you'd be like, this is not anything to think about or worry about. But at work, I feel like the smallest little leap, of feeling like something went wrong turns into like the biggest, elephant in the room. So they had this pretty fraught relationship. She was pretty terse in the way she wrote her emails. She seemed pretty negative. This client that I worked with was telling me, it was a tough relationship to work through. And then we went to our yearly leadership meetings, and I met her. I met her in person. And almost immediately, all of this tension and frustration and behind the screen drama melted away, because I got it. I got who she was. She's like that. She's just a little bit, she's not full of fluff. She's to the point, but she's hilarious. And the humor wasn't coming through over email, over phone calls, over Zooms. When I met her in person, it made sense. And since then, we've had such an easier working relationship. And so that's one of the pieces to why I think in person, we're reading less through, between the lines of emails. We are able to connect as humans, see the whites of one another's eyes. And then, yes, there's that piece of brainstorming, innovation, water cooler conversations that are hard to replicate virtually. I don't say impossible. I think those are one of the areas where we're learning how to do it differently. We're innovating right now. It feels different. It feels like it's not possible to do. I think we're still learning how to do it. I think it's possible. We just have to figure out the right way. But there is a magic of being in person, whether that cadence is once a month, 3 times a week, once a quarter, once a year. There is a magic to being in person that cannot be replicated to some degree. There's just something about humans coming together physically that is super important as much as we can get there.
I love it. Well, and kind of lends into something else I want to ask you about. I never tire of hearing you explain Gen Z. And I think, again, you're right in the middle, and you're perfect to do this, because I think some of us in the older demographics kind of look at them and don't understand. And in fairness, I think they look at us and don't largely understand. And one of the things I heard you say recently is you mentioned the Gen Z work ethic and the clash points that can come in. And I'm not proud of this, but my first thought was work ethic. And the reason I thought that, I had to stop and examine my thoughts there. And the reason I thought it is because we came up with, there was one version of a work ethic, and you either had it or you didn't. And we knew what it meant. And we knew when, somebody would come interview and we go, well, their work ethic, I don't know. We knew exactly what that meant.
Oh, yeah.
It seems to me Gen Z more is interested in ethics about their work. It's not that they don't have a work ethic. It's just so different, and nothing that we were ever presented with as an option. It sounds like it's written in hieroglyphics. Can you please explain?
I would love to. This work ethic thing. First of all, It happens every time a new generation enters a workplace. Literally every time there is I use this information in my presentations as a slide, but there's a researcher who went and looked at a brief history of Nobody Wants to Work Anymore. And he pulled headlines from the last century, actually, saying, the young generation doesn't want to work anymore. The oldest headline he found dated back to, I believe it was 1894.
That's
So
awesome.
this idea that nobody wants to work anymore, it is like a rite of passage for the older
Okay,
generations to see the younger generations be like, they don't want to work hard. These young whippersnappers, they're just,
these kids. Yeah.
These kids, yeah, it's just, again, it's a rite of passage. And it's nothing new. Millennials, I'm a millennial, as you've mentioned, and when I entered the workforce, 1,000,000% people were like lazy, entitled, narcissistic, have no work ethic, terrible workers. So there's so many things to point out here. First of all, there's the life stage thing that always gets missed in the conversation of generations. We have to consider life stage. That is a huge piece of where each generation is at. So Gen Z is new to the workforce. Of course, they're going to, be learning what work ethic looks like, what it means to work hard, how to put in, a day's work. And people reflect back and are like, no, I had great work ethic from day one. I guarantee you the older generations you were working with may not have thought that you did, because it probably looked different than their work ethic. And that's the crux of the argument is different is not wrong. It's different. And so what do we learn from the difference that might benefit everyone, which is kind of, my mantra. Let's learn to move the workplace in a way that is a net benefit for every single generation at work. Now, Gen Z, they are a very interesting generation in the sense that they are entering the world of work, their work years, and they're a generation that has never known a time without smartphones, without, the availability to access information at the drop of a hat. Now AI, especially for the younger generations, is at their fingertips. So that's a whole another thing. And Gen Z, their anchor big event and condition, because that's how I talk about generations, as you know, Mary, but for your listeners, generational identities are not birth years, but rather the things that you experience during your formative years. So roughly your early teens to your early 20s, events and things that were happening around the world, even things like pop culture, fashion, etc. Those things shape your perception on how you see the world, because during that period of time, as human beings, our brains are developing, we're coming to terms with the world around us, figuring out how we feel about all kinds of things from religion, politics, communication, work ethic. And Gen Z came of age, the older ones especially, in the pandemic. And it was a humbling experience for many of them. I had one Gen Zer come up to me after a presentation and he said, Lisa, I looked at my millennial peers and I was like, I will not be like you. I will not incur hundreds of thousands of dollars of student debt. I will not just get a random career. For example, my career, my parents were like, as a millennial, my boomer parents were like, Lisa, go do a job that you love, that lights you up. We want you to love life and love what you do. And so I went to college and I got a degree in comparative religion. And they were like, ooh, maybe not, maybe, okay, well, okay, sure. Now, Gen Z's parents, which are Gen Xers, are telling their kids, absolutely not. You need to make money. If you like to, learn about religion, buy a book, make that your hobby, but you need to get a practical degree. So Gen Zers, they've been very practical. So this Gen Zer said to me, I got a very practical degree. I went to an in-state college, community college. I had all of my ducks in a row. I was ready to graduate. And right as I was, March 2020, the pandemic hit and all of my plans fell apart. Everything that I had carefully put in place, none of it actually came to fruition. And he was like, this was extremely humbling for me, a very humbling lesson. And I learned that no matter how much you plan, things can happen that can just turn your world upside down. And so a lot of Gen Zers will say to me, why am I paying dues at work now when I have no idea what's coming to pass in the future? Making a 5-year plan, cool, okay, but what if another global pandemic destroys the world as we know it? I don't want to defer my happiness until the future. I want to live right now. So I will work, I will show up at work, I will do my work well, I want to earn my paycheck, but am I going to go above and beyond? Probably not. I'm going to act my wage. And that act my wage, I've said that a few times and people bristle whenever I say it. But then I also want to ask people why. Why would we bristle at someone saying they're going to act their wage? And why do we expect people to just go above and beyond and put in extra hours and all of that? And that's the thing, work ethic to older generations often meant going above and beyond, putting in, all the hours that they could, really being devoted to their job, seeing it as their vocation. The younger generation isn't seeing it that way. And I don't know that that's a bad thing, actually. I think it's an evolution of thought. I think it's potentially good for all of us. And at the same time, if you still hold on to that idea of work ethic that boomers and maybe traditionalists had, I also don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. But I think we can all hold our own perspectives of what work ethic looks like and not need to judge or see another generation as having a less than work ethic than we do. It's just different. It's just different.
And this is why I love every time we get to talk, because you always make me see something in a new way. Well, everybody, as you can tell, Lisa and I had a great time, and there's much more information from her yet to come, but let's stop here for today. And we'll be back next week with part 2 of my conversation with Lisa Walden, and her contact information is linked in today's show notes. Thanks for joining us today. Until next time, I'm Mary Schuster for October Research, where knowledge is the competitive advantage.